Hi, Scott Grove here from Imagine Grove, and I'd like to share some tips that I use to get a perfectly clear casting. Most of us are woodworkers or work in shops, and the casting is not the only thing we do. So cleanliness is really hard to kind of keep track of because dust is everywhere. So a few things that I do is after I pour, I certainly want to clean my bottles and get all that residue off. As you can see here, you know, if you get drips, then dust sticks to that. And when you're pouring and pouring this material out, these particles can fall in. So after you pour, you want to clean, and before you pour, I use a little acetone. You can use alcohol, lacquer thinner, and certainly wipe down your bottles. Make sure that there's nothing sticking on there that can fall off. That's important. Also, your mixing stick, make sure that's perfectly clean. I actually don't like to use wooden mixing sticks for a couple reasons. One, they can contain moisture, so if you're mixing urethane resins, that can be a problem. And two, you know, they're rough surfaces and things can stick on there. So if you only have a wooden stick, certainly wipe that down. I make my own out of 1/4-inch HDPE. Nothing sticks to this stuff as far as resin, but I still want to wipe this thing down so there's no static electricity, that little fine dust get in there. I also wipe my outside ends inside of my mixing container. Again, really want to make sure you start with everything that's perfectly clean. Your mold, obviously your mold you want to be clean, and I keep a paper towel or a piece of plastic or another piece of HDPE on top of that to be sure no floating debris gets into it. Very, very important. Lastly, after I do my mixing, I'm actually going to use a filter to pour through into my mold. And that does two things. One, it helps actually break any bubbles up that you've stirred into the mix. Now, Total Boat thick cast is great stuff. They're designed to release bubbles, but bubble management is always an issue. So by pouring through a filter, any of those larger bubbles kind of get strained out, literally. And two, again, if there's any, I don't know, pieces of dust that have fallen into your mix, who knows where that comes from, it will act as some extra insurance. Lastly, you want to make sure you're clean. So I will blow myself off. Make sure you don't have any little pieces of dust from a previous operation that may fall into your mixing. So cleanliness is really important. Just be sure that you minimize or eliminate all foreign debris, and you'll get a perfectly clear casting every time. Hope you enjoyed this little tip. Stay tuned. Total Boat, thanks for the samples, and watch for this video. Another tip to get a really good casting is to degas or vacuum your resin after you mix it. If you have enough working time, which I do here, we've got a 5-hour set, I'm putting in my vacuum chamber, and that will pull out all the bubbles. I know that some people will do pressure casting, so instead of taking those little bubbles, making them big, they float up and pop. You put it in a pressure pot, and that will compress, or pressurized casting, taking any bubbles and making them small and microscopic. So here I'm putting in a vacuum, my vacuum pot, and I don't know if you can see there, but you wait, it'll slowly foam, and then it'll foam up. All those bubbles will be pulled out. You get a thing of foam, and you just wait until that foam sort of pops all of the bubbles, and it will relax. And now you have a bubble-free mixture. Because when you stir, you add bubbles. And I think we're just about ready to pour. I'm still going to use my filter to pour, just in case there's any debris and maybe a remaining bubble here and there. So that's how you get a perfectly clear casting. Lastly, when you pour, pour just in one corner and let the resin flow out. Don't be dribbling all over the place, because you could actually roll over a small cavity and catch or trap some air bubbles. Lastly, per their recommendations, you don't want to cast more than 2 inches thick, because the resin is exothermic. Even though it's a slow set, And if it creates too much heat, it'll cause all sorts of problems. And one last tip is I'll use a heat gun to kind of just blow and pop any of those surface bubbles. They should migrate out and pop themselves, but it's always a good idea to get as many bubbles out of there as possible. I put a piece of wax paper on top. If I put paper towel, there might be a risk of it sticking to any resin and what have you, causing more problems. And that's it. No dust. Don't make any dust. Heat management is critical. Most of these products are designed for 70 degrees. Resins are exothermic. And if they get above say, 125 degrees, that's where there can be some problems. So I'm going to manage this, watch this. I poured a little more than 2.5 inches. And I'm going to occasionally check, I'm going to occasionally test the temperature of the resin with an infrared thermometer and make sure that there isn't thermal runaway, meaning the exotherm creates heat, which creates more exotherm, and it just sort of thermal runaway. If there's an issue, I might put a fan over this to help relieve some of that excess heat. I could also put ice around this thing, create a colder environment. You just want to control that temperature. Once this gels up, I don't want to get completely hard. I'll put another layer on top of that and build up my layers to create a large, thick casting.